Mhm.
And we sat there until quite late. At the beginning, we were all just introducing ourselves. It was a little bit more formal. But by the end of the evening, we were just sitting around chatting about everything under the sun. And it was a really good, close kind of feeling. He's a wonderful person. And then the next day, he did a lot of press. And then it was the following day that we did the Battle of the Bands, which is an outside scene, by the way. We're in a kind of park setting with a stage set up, and then Chaz, along with another couple of judges, are sort of under an awning, viewing the bands that are battling for supremacy.
Nowadays with Twitter, you're able to get instant feedback, every episode. Were there any fan reactions that shocked you, like something you thought people would like and they didn't, or something you weren't so sure how it would play on screen, but it turned out that pleased everyone?
Well, nothing pleases everyone. And for every particular reaction, there's an equal and opposite reaction as well. I mean, clearly there are an entire legion of fans who love Eclair. Clearly, there's also a legion of fans who are saying, enough with the Eclair.
Hmm.
It's one of the wonderful things about Twitter, as you pointed out, is getting the instant feedback, but also getting the diversity of feedback. We love getting it. We can only interact to a certain point because there's only so many hours in the day. But I love responding to fans. I love hearing what they say, even when they're saying really negative things,
Hmm.
because it all helps to inform how we move forward. And in the old days, and by the old days, I mean 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you just didn't get that immediate feedback. You had to wait for quite a while, and it was always filtered through. You would get ratings, and you might get letters in the mail. You
Right.
recall the old days when people used paper, and there were stamps and things called letters and a post office. It's really excellent. Like when I go on Twitter first thing in the morning, it's sometimes to say something and to update something because I've got some news to impart. But more than that, I want to scan through everything to see, what people are thinking of, but also just hear news that I may not have been aware of. I mean, was there a promo released at night on Team Nick that I hadn't seen? So
Hmm.
I'll scan through, and if there has been, I'll view it, and then I can direct people to it. It's a wonderful, wonderful two-way communication system.
There are plenty of new characters being added to the show, and a lot of people have been pointing out they seem to have rather unique names. And I guess Imogen was pretty unique too for recent new people. But like we have Campbell Saunders, Becky Baker, and then Mike Dallas.
Yeah.
What goes into creating a name for a character, and who ultimately comes up with the final name?
Well, the writers come up with names, and you try and come up with a name that feels right for the character. And I think when you see Becky Baker, that's a perfect name. With Campbell, we wanted someone who was a hockey player. Mike Dallas is a hockey player as well. And so to call somebody by their last name, it just works. But then there's some mechanical things that come in. You use a service a clearance service. So we go through and find out, well, is there anybody named, Mike Dallas who might complain that their character is too closely based on them? And if there is, we choose another name or a variation. That's happened in the past where we've had to change a name. And the other thing is we try not to, unless it's as a kind of an inside joke, like there's a character named Ari coming up, which of course was a reflection of the Eli character in the Love Roulette, who became Ari in the play.
Hmm.
Try not to use a name that's been used before or is confusing with one of the other names that's currently around.
Now, one of the most anticipated things for season 12 or before any season starts is, of course, the opening credits. And I had the privilege of seeing those a few weeks ago when I came to visit. What do you think makes the opening credits so important to the fans?
Yes, a lot of thought goes into the opening credits. They're expensive to shoot. And when things change, you want to be able to take out a certain section of them and add. So if somebody's coming in mid-season and they're really important to the story, you want to be able to add them to the credits and do so in a way without having to reshoot the entire credit sequence. So it's a nice balancing act. First of all, we have to decide who is going to be in the basic credits for the year. And even that we get it wrong sometimes because the writing process, the story writing process for the entire season is so organic. At the time we're creating the opening credits, we have an idea what's going to be happening by the end and which characters will become prominent. Sometimes characters, as the stories go along, suddenly achieve a lot more prominence. At the beginning, we didn't think of putting them in the opening credits, and now it's like, oh, why weren't they in the opening credits?
Mm-hmm.
But it's really trying to come up with something that foreshadows a little bit of how they'll be featured during the year, but you don't want to give away too much.
Right.
So keep it fresh and lively. I think when people see the first 5 seconds of these opening credits, there's something a little bit different of them. It's the same but different. The people, I think, might say, "Whoa," which I'm glad of. And then of course the biggest question is who gets the Degrassi credit at the end coming off of their back.
I know, but I can't say.
That's right.
Now, even though you're very experienced, obviously, in the television industry, they always say that you learn something new every day. So I'm curious, what's something that you've, I guess, recently learned while working on Degrassi that you've used?
I'm not sure that I can name something specific, but you're so right that things change absolutely every day. The biggest change that's happening right now, and it's something that we're very active in exploring and wanting to address, is that more and more of our fans are watching the show on their computer screens or on their iPads or any kind of tablets or smartphones or computer screens. And that means that the audience on television itself, at least on the initial viewing, a lot of people are saying, and by a lot, I mean like 10% now, but it's an accelerating number, are saying, well, I couldn't catch it at Monday at 10, but that doesn't matter. I can catch it either online at teennick.com or muchmusic.com, or in some other way. I can download it from iTunes. But we need to be in that space. And it's not an easy transition because our core, how we're able to finance the show and move it forward comes from the television broadcast right now. And at the same time, we need to recognize that that's there, but address how people are actually viewing the show, and that's changing dramatically. So I'm not going to say it's something that has changed the show, but it's changing our thinking about how we can possibly reach out to the audience in even better ways.
Well, adding to that, Teen Nick doesn't broadcast in HD, so I was wondering is Teen Nick converting ever to HD, or?
I ask that question every year. One change that they did make, I think in 2010, which we kept asking for, was if you're not broadcasting in HD, can you at least show the full picture, the 16:9 picture?
Right.
Which means you've got black bars at the top and the bottom. And they did agree to start doing that. So at least we're seeing everything that was shot.
Mm-hmm.
It's more expensive for a broadcaster to broadcast in HD. I'm very surprised that any broadcaster today doesn't move to HD, but it is a lot more expensive broadcasting that way. So I understand that it's something that they have to weigh. So it's really up to them. I'd love to see them in HD. I'm sure they would love to be in HD. It's just a question of when that happens.
I thought for one of the last things, instead of the typical who's your favorite character, what's your favorite episode, I'm going to ask about supporting characters that you wish were developed more, maybe had more storylines. And I know that some characters are simply put in place to push other plots, along with the main characters, but I know there has to be at least one or two people who you wish maybe turned into a main character or had, more time on the show.
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't know whether I can answer it right off the top here, because a lot of the time we have been able to, the best example, of course, is Aislinn. And we were able then, we just made a mental note. We really want to see this character, come back. And boy, has she come back. In most cases, I'm trying to think of one where we haven't been able to bring them back. There's certainly a number of characters who've been fantastic, who've just remained supporting characters or have come and gone, and easily could have, if the stories had gone in a different direction, easily could have taken more of a prominent role. But I'm not sitting here right at this moment sort of regretting that that hasn't happened. It would have been nice if it had.
Hmm.
And I could easily see a number of characters having assumed greater prominence. But there's nobody that right at this moment, unless you can suggest someone that I say, oh man, I really wish, they hadn't been tied up in that movie and that we could have developed their character more. Obviously, with the main characters, we would, love to have carried on with Mia more, some of the graduating characters,
Hmm.
or the Darcy or the Jimmy character, but they had just had their time, and now the actors are no longer available. Yeah. So do you have a suggestion?
Well, I think one of the recent ones that a lot of people were wondering about would be Fitz, probably.
Yeah. No, Fitz definitely. One of the things with Fitz, it was so great that the tension between Eli and Fitz, and then Fitz turned into quite a redemptive kind of character,
Hmm.
and it was always perplexing to know, was he really redeeming or was he not? And those kind of characters are really intriguing for television. So I could certainly see having carried on more with him. It was difficult just because of the storyline. The writers sort of wrote themselves into a corner where it was going to be very difficult to have him come back and be part of the mainstream Degrassi scene. But as an actor, it would have been great to have him more around. There are a number of characters that are just interesting, really good actors,
Hmm.
and we just get caught up in a storyline. And the other thing is, there's only so many stories we can tell. I mean, we already have an ensemble cast of about 20,
Right.
and we can't increase it to 40. Without watering down some of the main storylines. So, yes, I don't envy the writers sometimes in having to make decisions about characters, just needing to step back out of the limelight.
And then briefly, the LA Complex is coming back next week, and with the second season and the first one, 6 episodes, but now we're back with 13 full new episodes, and it's airing the same time, in Canada and the U.S., so everyone can watch together. What can fans expect from this season?
It's even better. I loved the first season. I mean, the episodes, the 6 episodes in season one, I've been just so proud of the work that everybody put in, and I think it's wonderful television. We would have loved more people to have seen it. The ratings were disappointing,
Hmm.
but the people who did watch it, the engagement was extraordinary. The reviews were fantastic, whether it was the New York Times or Variety or the LA Times, and online the reviews and the engagement. So the task for this summer has been to not just carry on, but to make the show even better, which is a really difficult thing to do. But Martin Garrow and the gang have absolutely done that. We've upped the ante in so many different ways. I think the plot twists at the end of each episode are, as shocking or even more so, or as surprising as in the first season, and it's in virtually every episode.
Hmm.
And little things like the hair wardrobe, we've upped the ante there. It's going to be a fantastic summer. My hope is that more and more of the audience, starts to, engage with the show.
Right.
And I think as the summer progresses, that's going to happen. It's a little bit easier to attract an audience to a new show in the summertime. And we'll just have to see. I'll be interested in everyone's reaction, but I'll be very surprised if there aren't a lot of, OMG, and I didn't see that one coming. And man, I was so surprised by this show. I thought it was going to be a Melrose Place knockoff, and it isn't.
And now, just one last thing about Degrassi before we end the interview. I know we're right before the season starts, and you don't want to give away too much. And we know that you all love doing your little riddles and that kind of stuff. So I was wondering if maybe you had like a word or two that would secretly describe something coming up that this season that we're not going to have any idea about. But then once we see the episode, we'll go, oh, okay.
When I see the finale, and we're just actually mixing the show now, so we're just doing all the music spotting. Although there's a lot of original music this summer, I can't help but cry. I won't even say they're tears of joy or sadness; they are just tears. So would be my one word.